What's up, y'all? We get ready.
You are experiencing the I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host, RGB. I really mean it. 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 I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host. I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host. I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host, RGB.
This is the I Really Mean It Show podcast with your host, RGB. So glad that y'all could join on today. And we got a lot to get to with today's topic, man. So we're not going to delay too much. So glad again that you guys could join. Hope that you had a wonderful day with family and friends on yesterday. And however you choose to spend yesterday. I know, there's some that are always going to be mindful of some of the reasons that the Thanksgiving holiday came to be. And I think a lot of us are aware of, what took place in the history and whatnot. And so I would like to assume that many people were not getting together to celebrate that particular aspect of history, but using it as a day to spend with friends and family, no different than what you've been doing all day long. And let me say this, those kind of things when you're getting together like that are really just an accumulation of what you've been doing all year. So it's not really a situation where you get together for things like Thanksgiving and all that and you try to manufacture it. If you've been doing right by your family all day, then it just comes naturally, all day, all year. If you've been kind of, low down and dirty and not really around, then, it's going to be hard to kind of make Thanksgiving Day credible for you because you're not really set that standard when it comes to getting together as family, because you're trying to manufacture it because you're using food and all this stuff to, be your driver instead of using the relationships that you have. We talked about relationships last week on last week's podcast, but using those as your driver. So good to see all y'all. Anita, how you doing? Casina, what's up? Frat, got Xavier Durden joining in. That's great frat right there. Salitha, Carla, Mr. Clay, how you doing? Miss Brown, Miss Shay Brown, how you doing? Leslie Thompson, Cedric Nelson, everybody, man. Thank y'all for joining again. The I Really Mean It Show podcast with me, your host, RGB. Friday, November the 24th, what some people refer to as Black Friday. Which again, get back to some of the history. You may be familiar with what actually took place when they referred to it as Black Friday. I'll let you go research that on your own. I'm not going to spend time on this particular podcast discussing, again, some of the history. You can research it and make your own judgment call. But anyway, we're here today. Today's subject is the culture of sexual harassment. And what I want to get to specifically, I don't want to spend a ton of time rehashing everything in the news and kind of being just a sounding board for that. But you do know that over the last several weeks, there's been, several stories that have come out with allegations, man. And it kind of began with this whole Harvey Weinstein thing in Hollywood, which if you're familiar with Hollywood and kind of how things go down, then you know that you really shouldn't be too surprised that these things come out, these stories. And again, if you take a step back, sexual harassment began when, you first had human beings show up. So whenever that took place, at some point, once you had two human beings, right, then you had abuse. right? And really abuse could have started before then with one person. You could abuse yourself, but certainly once you had two people, and if they had differences, right, which actually two people do, that leads to opportunities for abuse and for harassment. So throughout time, obviously, you've had, different things come up, and even just in recent memory and time, how you've had different allegations come up at different times. Sometimes it's right there immediate in the moment. And what you're starting to see now is people feeling comfortable and confident to come out almost out of the woodwork and address situations that happened in the past. Whether you're talking about Harvey Weinstein, whether you're talking about Bill Cosby, man, whether you're talking about Roy Moore, the Alabama Republican, Minnesota Senator Al Franken, a Democrat. Roy Moore is a Republican. Charlie Rose. Now, who the hell thought Charlie Rose was going to be sexually abusing folk? And so now women coming out against Charlie Rose. You got the guy at Fox News that they let go, Bill, whatever his name is, Bill O'Reilly. You've had Kevin Spacey out here with young children and stuff like this. So it's just, not to say that it's out of control. It's been out of control, and that's the purpose of this topic, y'all. But it's really out of control where you just have one thing kind of coming up. You don't know what day another accuser is going to come up and say something. But I was reading a study from The Economist from 2016 that spoke to roughly about half of all women will experience some form of harassment in the workplace in the United States. Now, different countries measure it different and how they report it. But when you look at it demographically, outside of the demographic, and y'all stay with me on this, outside of the demographic of ages 30 to 44, every other age demographic, the United States is the leader in sexual harassment reports. I'll say that again. The leader in sexual harassment reports in the age bracket of 30 to 44. That's the only one that the United States is not the leader on. Actually, Great Britain is the leader in that age group, which I'd have to dig a little deeper to see why that is. But when you talk about, from 18 to say 29, and then from 45 and above, the United States of America is the leader, according to The Economist publication from 2016, their survey. And they surveyed women across the country, different demographics and cultures and whatnot, to get this collection of data, responses of women as to had they experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, that's not to say that men don't experience it either or are coerced into it or whatnot, because that definitely happens. We don't want to minimize the fact that sexual harassment or blackmailing and things like that takes place for men too. So, let's not get the thing twisted. But it's interesting that culture permeates in America. So what I want to talk about today is not so much of what Charlie Rose or Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby, any of these other folks that have had allegations come up. I want to talk to it at a little bit more of a micro level as to, for those of us that are here, say in Memphis, you're working at a company or you've got your own business, and your own business starts, you're your first employee, right? So, and we talked about relationships in business last week. So, folks, you're your first employee, even when you're starting your business. Then you hire yourself, right? You start the business, you have your idea. The first thing you do is you hire yourself, and then you begin hiring other people. All right. So as you hire other people, one of the things you get into is human resources. See, now you have to have some kind of management, right, of human resources. And that's not easy. Right? As you start having people in your business and you're interacting, whether you've got freelance salespeople, right, going around, or if you've got physical brick and mortar locations or office settings or things like that, as you have people interacting and, they have differences, right? Whether it's between men and men, women and women, and then certainly what you're seeing is men and women. And as they have those differences, it creates this natural culture that some people begin to see themselves in different light or in different pecking orders than the next person, the next man or woman. And so that's just giving you a little bit of what we're getting into today. The first thing I like to do when we're talking about a topic or, we're looking to explain something is you have to define it. And see, when you define it, what it does is it sets the tone for the entire conversation, right? Because people don't like to define things. They like to go off their emotion, right? And so when you define things, it takes people out of that emotion and now come down to what we're talking about. Let me define sexual harassment because even when you look at Congress, which the U.S. Congress is looking to be a leader in trying to clean this up, which is, hysterical to me. That Congress would want to do that. Dominic Lawson, how you doing, brother? What's going on? Sarah, Greg Bernard, Miguel, Orlandis. What's going on, brother? I need to get with you, man. Ann Yates, Omar, how you doing? What's going on? Angie, Samantha, Danielle Reed, what's up, girl? How you doing? Jay Favor, what's up, girl? And brother Haynes, how you doing? Let me define sexual harassment for y'all real quick. And when you go to whether it's the Webster's Dictionary or Wikipedia, they kind of have the same definition. And it goes as this. Sexual harassment is the bullying or coercion, the bullying or coercion of a sexual nature or the unwelcome or inappropriate promise of rewards in exchange for sexual favors. Okay, I'll read that one more time. Sexual harassment is the bullying or coercion, whatever you want to say, of a sexual nature or the unwelcome or inappropriate promise of rewards in exchange for sexual favors. So a little bit of definition of blackmail in there. But again, that's how you're defining sexual harassment. So bullying or coercion is a part of what we're talking about. So as we're looking at these different cases, and many of you probably have experienced this, men and women, but certainly some of you ladies here on my timeline and listening on the podcast, you may have experienced maybe not sexual harassment to the deep definition that I just read, but you've experienced whether it speaks to the unwelcome or inappropriate, touching or jokes that are being made or situations that you're being placed in where your sexuality is being exposed or being made fun of or being made a mockery of. Whatever it is that makes you personally feel uncomfortable, right, is a form of harassment, and that's not welcome. That's not something you should just be dealing with or let just ride. That's something that you should look to address immediately. Now you get into that and you look at some of these stories when you say addressing sexual harassment immediately, because in almost all these stories with Charlie Rose or Kevin Spacey or even Harvey Weinstein, these are situations where people are coming, so an allegation goes out. So someone's bold enough to step out and have the right channel to get the allegation out there that creates the news headline. And then there are other women, some have have their lawyer and things like that to help guide them, or some show up and feel like, you know what, I was a victim of that too, right? Or I had this happen too. And so now here's an opportunity for me to express and share what my interaction with the so-called individual that's receiving these allegations. And so it's interesting that in a lot of these cases, because, a lot of these men are older men. So even though in a lot of cases they have indiscretions even late into their later years, which is kind of crazy. But then, these are back when these guys were kind of more in their prime. They were in their late 20s and 30s and kind of first coming to power. If you think of a Harvey Weinstein, kind of more so in the 80s, Charlie Rose, these guys, Kevin Spacey's been acting since the 80s and whatnot. So, man, it's interesting that the women are kind of coming out. Some of them are getting on the Today Show and yada, yada, yada. They're getting in the news and they're coming back with these very gruesome stories. And so that's at a real macro level in terms of what you see in the media. And to couple that with the media people are then the politicians, which that's a culture that's existed for some time in terms of politics, local, state, and federal level, where you've had this culture of kind of sexual harassment. And it is important, and I want to have a few of you all, comment and join me on this here shortly. But it's interesting, and there's a couple schools of thought with this. The legitimate question that's being asked is, why are these women coming out now? You're talking about something, with some of these women that was 30, 40 years ago. So why come out now? You've had 30 or 40 years to do that. Now, I'm going to address that here in a second because there's even a counter argument to that. Then you've got the other school of thought as to what kind of culture have we allowed, in this country and just kind of around where there's a comfort level with mistreating people based on their gender. We certainly documented and know what that is from a racial and color standpoint and a culture standpoint that way. That's been well documented. And that, unfortunately, as we've seen in many platforms, that culture still exists as well. And so that continues to be a great disappointment in a country that touts itself the way that America does. But what within our culture, y'all, allows this kind of underlying current where men of power or perceived power, whatnot, whether it's given to them or whether they do actually have it, feel the comfort level to be able to mistreat women within the workforce. It's a huge problem. And again, if you're a local business owner, take this down to the micro level here in Memphis. If you're a business owner here, you should be looking at how you're structuring your business to not have that, even if you don't have employees. So even if you're the only employee and you're looking at with your customer, how are you ensuring that your vendors or anybody that's doing anything with your business doesn't have that kind of experience? CBS or Fox, for example, they have a fairly large infrastructure to be able to absorb a Bill O'Reilly or a Charlie Rose going through this, and they continue to have some level of viewership and listenership. But even then, at some point, enough of these come out and that dies. But as you're a local business owner that's scaled fairly thin, so you got a fairly thin economies of scale, you can't afford to have something like this come up where you've got allegations, whether it's against yourself and women business owners. You're not excluded from this. So don't sit and think that, this is just about, the men. These allegations could come up about you, as crazy as that may sound. So you should be taking heed to this too. So if you're a business owner, how do you keep from having these kind of issues take place in your business? And we're going to talk about that some today. If you want to join, for those that are listening on the podcast, we're on Facebook Live. And so we've got people that we're interacting with there, and we want to be able to have you join in. So you can comment if you're on Facebook Live on my page. You can comment, I want to join, just hashtag I want to join, and I'll invite you on if you want to speak with me and speak with the viewers. I want to get your take on sexual harassment. Have you, maybe witnessed something or maybe had a feeling? I'm not asking you to come on here and snitch on nobody or go through no long tangent, but if you feel that it's a problem or you've seen it be a problem, I'd love to hear your take on it, and I'd love to hear what you feel could be done to alleviate this culture, whether it's in your company, if you feel it's there, or any company that you've worked for or you've heard about, even just here in Memphis or just around the country, wherever you are. So go ahead and comment that. I'd love to have, again, a few of you join in. Brandy, if you want to join in, I can invite you if you want to do so. I would love to have you. But anybody that wants to get in, go ahead and comment, and I will invite you on. So our topic today is the culture of sexual harassment. And it's time out for it, man. It really is. It's time out for it. It is gone on for way too long. And, I'm just ready for it to end, to be honest with you. I'm ready for it to end. And we can do so if we all work together. Mickey Renee says that sometimes people are afraid to say something for fear of losing their job, but also some women allow it to get ahead. Sis, I agree with you. The fear side of it is really interesting and intriguing to me. And that's actually a part of the culture in itself. The culture of sexual harassment has the actual act, and then there's the culture of either whether it's the cover up or the fear of the victim feeling like they might have done something to warrant it. They might have done something to encourage it, or any of the above. And so there is this fear and shame of it, even sometimes coming from the accused, who, you've heard of plenty of cases where they come out and say, well, no one's going to believe you because you're you and I'm me, essentially, which is a bunch of, malarkey. But they make the victim feel that way. And so he or she may not be willing to come out like that, to your point, Mickey, because of that fear of retaliation, right? Which in most companies, if you read your employee handbook, most companies that are worth their salt have some kind of clause or some kind of statement that speaks against retaliation. If they don't, they need to, and you need to recommend it. But when you have people that have a certain clout or, again, a certain power or perceived power, that can arise where now you've got individuals that are telling victims, oh, well, no one's going to believe what you say. And if you get out there and you start talking, you're not going to be able to find a job nowhere in Memphis. Just say, I'm going to make sure that you can't find no place to work and that you're blackballed and your name and your reputation is destroyed. Right. And so Mickey's exactly right. A lot of people do not want to jump in there like that and, really be boisterous and report, what actually happened. And that's a shame because what it does is then that just keeps feeding the culture. Right. It's just like y'all yesterday when y'all was eating that turkey and dressing everything. Y'all was eating the mac and cheese. Y'all just kept on eating it. Y'all going back in the kitchen. Y'all getting more helpings and stuff, more dressing, more of this. And you planned on yesterday for some of y'all overindulgent. So it's the same thing that ends up happening to this sexual harassment culture is they constantly going, right? Constantly eating it up, right? Because it doesn't get reported. It doesn't get that it's not exposed. And that's difficult. It's easy for me to sit here and say, just come out and go to your HR. But in some cases, right, depending on the size of the business, if you're going to the business owner, they are HR. So now what do you do? Right? What do you do when the person that has committed the treacherous act, is the CEO, is a senior management, is a senior executive, maybe your boss's boss, maybe and your boss, his or herself, right? So, those things aren't easy because it can put you in a somewhat precarious economic situation. And then even more importantly, potential damage of reputation, or at least that's the perception of it. So, good comment, Mickey. It's a shame. It definitely is. What up, Daniel Watson? What's going on? How you doing? Lamar Bowen, how you doing? Daryl, Latoya, Trina, Melissa, how you doing? Marcus Young, what's going on, brother? But again, we're talking about this culture of, sexual harassment. And so, I was asked as I was putting this together, what I think, should happen, or what I think that, can be done about this particular culture. the one thing, Sam Upshaw, what's going on, brother? The one thing that I would take away is there's got to be a platform of education. So I started out by giving y'all the definition, right? Most people don't know what sexual harassment is, although that sounds crazy. They know their acts are wrong, right? But they don't know exactly. See, without defining it is in sports, right? And on the football field, you have definitive out of bounds lines, right? There's no gray area. You were either in play or you were out of play. Same with basketball. There's an inbound line that goes all the way around the court, right? And you're either in the court or you're out. The ball goes out of bounds, it's out of bounds, right? So it's clearly defined. But most people, because it's never clearly defined, and I'm speaking to the education. So when I'm asked the question of what can happen, anytime you're talking about changing a culture, it takes a few things: education and leadership. Those couple things off top you have to have. You have to have the leadership that's going to embrace a changing of the culture. And then you have to have the education that then ongoing teaches people as people get onboarded into your company, your organization, your business. And as they continue to work for your business, they're constantly reminded of that clear definition of how you defined it and the channels for which you can report it confidentially. And a lot of companies have done that. They've got confidential platforms on which you can report up the chain when there's been an issue or you've witnessed an issue, right? But so when I'm asked that question, the first thing I think to, and as someone that's an executive in an organization, right, as myself, when you talk about education, you're talking about the training, talent development. And so you have to clearly define it. But when I talk about leadership, in leadership, you have to embrace it. You have to embrace that training and that education. Here's what happens with a lot of organizations. I've witnessed this in my walk. Like I told you, I've been able to reach the executive level within an organization. And here's what happens. A lot of times, people at a certain level believe that they don't need training anymore. You know, I'm the CEO. I'm the vice president. You know, I don't need training. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years, right? And so, you know, my argument is always, you know, you could be driving for 30 years. That don't mean you're going the right damn direction. If I started out, if a few of y'all got in the car with me and I said, we're going to drive to California, but I'm going to get on I-40 East going to Nashville. All right. Just because I've been driving for a long time, I'm 36 years old. So I've been driving since I was 15. So just because I've been driving that long, don't mean I'm going in the right damn direction. If I jump on 40 East to go to California from Memphis, y'all look up and we in Nashville somewhere, and I say, well, we're heading towards California. No. Mm-mm. No, you're not. Or you gonna go around the world. It'll take you a long ass time to get there, right? So I use that analogy to say that executives within the company, whether you own your own company and you've titled yourself the director or the CEO or president, whatever it is, or you're within a corporate organization structure and you're in senior management or you're the CEO, you've got to embrace that education and that training, meaning that you've got to take the education and training yourself. What you find in these companies is so simple, whether it's in Congress and the Senate or it's in these corporations. The leadership refuses to embrace and be a part of education. They think that's just for the frontline employee, right? Or the back office employee. And it's for everybody. And if those people see you take that serious and you make statements that says, we're not going to tolerate this, and I'm going to make an example out of the first one, right? That's how you set the standard. We're all under the same standard, including myself, right? That's how you stand up and show the leadership. Right. And a lot of executives they don't have that kind of fortitude, right? That kind of leadership. Now they think that because of, you know, their salary and their title and where they are that, we'll kind of, you know, fly over this a little bit. We'll say a couple things, you know, but we'll just kind of let it slide. Right. No big deal. Or we haven't had an issue with this in the past. So, I'm not going to speak of it and make it no big deal. And leadership should stand up, starting with the managers. So if you're at the executive level and you've got managers reporting to you and directors and, people at different levels, again, you start with that hard message that we will not tolerate sexual harassment in this organization, whether it's with men, women, young folks, vendors, customers, clients, prospects, no matter what it is. We will not have that culture. The reason we will not is everyone will be aware of it because it's clearly defined, and the expectation is set, right? And then we create a channel of which you can report that up to the proper people, right? Now, the other side of that is who are the proper people, right? And so then it's got to go to some level of again, senior leadership, human resources, and it may even need to go to a third party that's going to be sworn to confidentiality, of course, a third party attorney firm. And I've seen that done where there's a third party that's involved where these things are routed confidentially, and that person has that avenue, right? And that third party is bound to the privacy and secrecy policy that you put in place. If they break that, now you've got legalities that come into play. But those are the two things that happen when you start talking about this particular culture, y'all, is you've got to have the education, but then the leadership has to step up. And in organizations where that doesn't happen, where the leadership takes a back seat and they might just do it to appease some auditors or things like that, or but they don't really participate in it themselves. See, it's just like with anything. Your frontline people, when they see you take that hard stand and you participate and hold yourself accountable, they'll naturally do that. And that greatly reduces, if not eliminates, that happening in your organization. I encourage you all that have your business, even if it's just yourself, put these things in place. And if you put it in writing and you read over it, it helps build that culture in your mind. So it's cognizant, you're cognizant of it all the time, So those of you that are in business that are on here, and several of you are, you've got to make sure that you embrace those two things. From a leadership standpoint, you're not going to stand for it. You're going to embrace it. And then from a training standpoint, you're going to make sure you have the right training platform that includes defining it, but also includes, kind of role playing it. What does it look like? Right? That's the other thing. So once you define it, go back to basketball. There's an out of bounds line, right? Well, how do you know when something, you have to watch a game. The reason, folks that know basketball is you watch the game. So you see when the ball go out of bounds, they turn it over to the other team. It is what it is, right? So now you have to see it in demonstration. What does it look like? What could it potentially feel like if I'm the aggressor or if I'm receiving that kind of energy, right? And so when you do that and you kind of practice that and you walk through some different scenarios and things like that, that helps in your preparation. It's just like practice, again, with basketball. That's why you go to practice. Allen Iverson didn't care nothing about no practice, but that's why you go, right? Because you're going to play in the game the same way that you practice. You practice hard, you're going to play hard in the game. You BS through practice, and you go find yourself at some point BSing through the game. So, Brandy McCarley, people say religion and politics are two things that should not be discussed in the workplace. Sex should be added to that list. Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Brandy. I think that it's usually not explicitly written. A lot of organizations that I've worked for, that I've seen or done business with, they don't explicitly state that in terms of sex being added into that. They usually don't have like hard defined in policy. That's usually something that's just discouraged, and again, in your natural culture. And so sexual harassment should be discussed. That's something that, particularly at the management level, there should be some level of training, and there should be some level of ongoing discussion. And then there are other things that you put in place to help avoid that. So, and thank you, Brandy, for that comment. There are some things that you should also put in place to help even avoid the situation altogether. I'll take myself. So I became a manager in my field. I first became a manager. I was around 24. I was almost 25 years old when I first became a manager. And I can remember managing teams where in some cases I might be even the only male, right? So I'm managing a lot of ladies, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, going up to 20 ladies, maybe another dude here now and then. But so I'm responsible for the coaching development of that talent, right? And as being the leader, a lot of times what ended up happening was there were tough conversations that had to be had, with young ladies, right? Or even sometimes there were more seasoned ladies. One thing I learned from a mentor kind of early on is when I'm having a coaching session with a woman, one of the things that I look for is the environment in which we're in, right? And I always make sure that we have some kind of visibility. So there's a couple things with it from myself. And people call it CYA and all this different thing, but it's just a good practice. So men that are in leadership, listen to this closely. And you're probably already doing this, but if you're not, I encourage you to continue doing it. So when you're in the office and you're coaching a woman, a female employee, one of the things that I took that I learned from a mentor was have some visibility to the outside. Don't be in an environment where nobody can see what's going on, right? Or even hear, in some cases, what's going on. Because, when you're, let's just say you got an office, you got no windows, and there's no window on the door, there's no nothing, you just close the door. Now it's just you and her in the room. Okay? So I don't have to go much further than that. It's just you and her in the room. And so in that case, if that's your only option, then you need to have what I would recommend is another female employee or another female manager, even better, as part of that coaching session. Particularly when you're going into having some difficult conversations about performance or progressive discipline. It helps make sure that you have a witness to that that's of the same gender as who you're coaching. And ladies, I encourage you to do the same thing in the reverse. If you're a woman manager out there and you're coaching a male employee, I encourage you to do the same thing. Make sure have another male employee or male manager be a part of that dialogue, particularly when it's tough, and try to not place yourself in too much of a box where there's no visibility to the outside. You're probably going to have a closed door conversation, right? Because you're having a private conversation with the individual. But be careful and be mindful of your environment, because you could put yourself in a tough situation, right? Where either that energy can be brought to you, or, if you're one of these people that give that energy, then you're just wrong either way. But what you don't want to do is be in a situation where allegations are then false, right? Because you're having this tough conversation, and people will use, in some cases, different angles, right? To try to get what they want, particularly when they feel embarrassed or slighted or whatnot. So those are some things that I kind of learned, from that. Make sure you document the conversation. So anytime you're having coaching conversations, you should document and you should have a follow-up. Now, I'm not trying to get into this training thing. I do that through the consulting business. So, but you got to make sure that you document the conversation. What you said, what you asked, what the response was, and then what's the follow-up. And include another manager, include HR on that, get recommendations, things like that. All those things help make sure that the interaction is the best for the employee and then best for yourself. And this, what I'm saying, works even for your business. And it's something to good in practice. Once you have that other employee outside yourself, and you got to start coaching and developing, someone else, you got to make sure that you keep awareness around your environment and things like that. So that person could be comfortable, and then you could be comfortable as the manager. So other people are joining. Karen, how you doing? Mr. Stimler, how you doing, sir? Long time no see. Ms. Rosser, how you doing? Mo Mastermind making an appearance. Thank you so much. Um, let's see. We've got some more comments. Daniel Watson, it may not yield immediate returns, but at the very least, you will have a firm understanding of your coworker. That in turn will lead to a level of trust because the unknown has become known. Then, when it comes to creating synergy necessary to complete the job, then you will have all the cards on the table. Daniel, I have to agree with you, brother, that we were kind of talking about this. When you're working with people, you've got to have the transparency, right? And this comes from the culture, right? The culture that's being driven within the company or within the organization. And again, that's why the leadership is so important, man, because that's what kind of permeates throughout the organization. Again, you always say that it starts from the top, just like in sports. You look at winning teams, you look at mediocre teams, and then you look at not so good teams. Start at the top and start working your way down, because what you're following is how the business is ran and what's the mindset of leadership, what's their expectation, and what level of accountability do you have when things go really well, and then when things don't go so well, what's the accountability level, and then how does that permeate throughout the organization? It's the same at work. It's the same within your business. Same thing. So, no, great comment. Cleve, what's going on, brother? Tina Taylor, Mike Green, what's going on, man? Your brother Mike out there in Nevada, Las Vegas, Nevada, man. What's going on, brother? But yeah, man, that's what you're talking about right there. Derek Tucker, how you doing, man? Josh Midget, Solomon, what's going on, my man? Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. With my brother Daniel Watson, that you want to make sure that you have that that proper culture. It's very important. It's important in the organizations, and that's where organizations tend to die. Before they run out of money, they run out of culture. So I've always said that. Another question that I've asked, that Brandon McCarley, if you're ready to jump on, just let me know. You could jump on if you want to participate in this conversation, or anybody else that wants to participate in the conversation. Hashtag I want to join. Just comment right here on this particular post with the Facebook live feed, and I'll invite you on. It'll split the screen in half. You'll be able to come on, and we'll be able to have a technology-based face-to-face conversation. So another question that I've been asked is, RGB, do you feel that the victims, again, getting back to some of the cases that have come up, do I feel that they are credible? It's difficult for me to say. I'm not a big, Fox News watcher or CNN and all that kind of thing, man. So I don't really get into the talking head stuff and all that. I'm sure that, many of them are credible. And just like with anything, some may not be. But at the end of the day, I think, oftentimes when someone's willing to go that far with their presentation, their story, there's something there. Now, whether they exaggerate it or whether they're modest and don't tell enough of it, right? I think all those things come into play. So I'm not really here to judge, someone's credibility until I see something or hear about something myself that I researched that, maybe does a job right or something like that, or it doesn't really add up. But, I don't really get too much into the credibility. Another question that I'm asked, quite frankly, too, with this is, why are some allegations, condoned a little bit more than others? Meaning that some people have come out and said, why was, take someone like Bill Cosby, why was he slammed so much and had to take so many L's in his situation? But then some of these other folks, like, who knows what's going to happen to Charlie Rose, or you take Bill O'Reilly, who all he did was just lose his job. You know what I mean? And I'm sure he's facing some legalities and all that kind of thing. But, that's another thing. I can't answer so much as to why. I've got my own kind of suspicions as to, in some specific cases, like you look at Bill Cosby and what he was looking to do with NBC and the power that he was going to get in that particular ownership transaction. It's been said that that may contributed to his downfall. And then, quite frankly, there's some things that Bill did that put himself in that position. So, you could always kind of go back and forth with it. But again, I'm not here to, determine someone's credibility or their allegations. So then I'm also asked, what should business owners do? So if you're a local business owner, you're here in Memphis, or you're looking to get into business and you want to try to avoid this because, these kind of things can be, not only business killers, but they're definitely reputation killers, and for everybody that's counting on you and things like that to be tight on this, this kind of action can be very destructive, for yourself and then for the victims and your customers and everybody else, again, that's involved. So you have a great responsibility as a business owner. And again, go back to what I said earlier, culture, that training, education, excuse me, have it for yourself, right? And if you take the lead on it, everything else will fall into place. And then you have to hold people accountable to its execution, that it doesn't happen. And when it does happen, or if it happened, right, then you've got to take a strong stance on it so that people watching will know that whoever, business owner is going to be on top of it. They nipped it in the bud. They handled it the way it should be handled, and they got the consultation. They got the HR legal side of it done. They made sure that, the victim, had the right platform to be able to communicate and feel comfortable. They made sure that the person accused was had their due process, right? So they had a fair review, and in the event that there's hard evidence that's is conviction based, and then they take the proper action, right? And if it's a situation where there's no evidence or the evidence does not lead to even a suggestion of an issue, then they address that how they need to. But everything's firm and fair, and that's how they address it. Chris Tucker, how you doing? Weston Wiley, what's going on, my man? Brandon McCarley says, and Brandon, I'm trying to get you to go ahead and come on. You can come on the video, girl. You don't have to just post a comment, but you can come on if you want to accept the invitation. Brandon McCarley says there's a difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault. And yes, there is. So a sexual assault, you're starting to gain, you're taking that fast road down to rape at that point. So you've got a sexual assault where at that point you've had, a significant physical contact is taking place with a sexual assault. And the motive at that point is even deeper than you're talking about sexual harassment, right? Because remember, I defined sexual harassment for y'all earlier. Sexual assault, Brandy is right. There is a difference, and that goes to a whole nother set. And again, that's part of your culture, right? So as you're addressing all this, it all becomes one in the sense that you address it just that way, right? You address it, as it's not something that's going to be tolerated. And I'm going to make, as the leader, I'm not worrying about anybody else. I'm going to make the example out of the first joker that does it. The first time it happens, where there's, and again, the evidence is concrete, and it puts, down that proper road where everything's covered properly. I'm taking the stand on the first one, right? So that people know. Brandy also said, Daniel Watts, I definitely see your point. I just do not think everyone has the emotional intelligence to discuss these things at work. I agree with that. I can't say that I disagree with you, Brandy, there. And it's not even just the emotional intelligence, which that's an interesting term to use for that, because that has some truth. There is a level of emotional intelligence of understanding time and place with things. But I think it goes back to one of your earlier comments, Brandy, in terms of a lot of people don't talk about this stuff at work. Yeah, and Mickey said this was they don't talk about these things at work because of that culture of fear, right? There's the fear of loss, which is always big with the human being, right? There's always the fear of embarrassment, big with the human being. There's the fear of being blackballed, that I won't be able to get promotions, or things will start happening to me at work that don't necessarily violate the employee handbook, but they're just little subtle things like everybody wants to go and I'm just throw something real kiddish. They take the team to go get ice cream, but they don't invite you. You know what I mean? Which may be a little harsher, but so things start happening. You start applying for jobs, and then they bring in people, and then all of a sudden you got to start training them. So I know y'all been a part of that. I've heard y'all complain about that and see y'all post about it. So then that just becomes, an issue all along. So all those things are part of the fear as to why people don't raise it as an issue. As far as talk about things around sex and sexuality in the workplace, again, part of the culture, leadership has to kind of filter that out so that you don't get things like crude sexual jokes and things that could be offensive to other people. You're there to fulfill a business. You have a role there that doesn't include all that other garbage. So it's just something to be careful on. Nidra Reddit, how you doing, lady? Let's see. So looks like there's been some conversation between Daniel and Brandy. Nidra Reddit says that sexual harassment is a subject that's easier discussed, but this happens so many times in the workplace because the victim will be retaliated. Yep. And Nidra, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. You're right. One of the fear factors is retaliation, which things, again, I'm going to keep going back to this. It goes back to the culture, right? And that's the reason it happens so much is senior leadership has to be held accountable, and you have to have the type of leadership that's going to hold his or herself accountable to this. And you're starting to see this a little bit more as millennial leaders get into like senior leadership. As millennial leaders get into senior leadership, you're starting to see their mindset is a little different than what you saw with baby boomers and the great generation, where things were so male dominated, and you had, while you still have a divide between pay with women and things like that, which is also ridiculous. That culture it's still kind of shrunk now, and women are in fields that they normally weren't in back in the day, 50, 60 years ago. And that culture of it being male dominated, and that thought that a woman can only do a certain job or a certain job function. I think, that ceiling's been broken. But when you start talking about this whole idea now that these things are still going on and it's still an issue here, and we're almost to 2018, it's time out for it, man. And organizations have to hold their senior leadership accountable that, hey, if we need to train on this, and these are ideas that y'all could be raising in your companies or even within your businesses as these things are happening. It's no different than things like data breaches and things like that. You've got to have the culture, and you've got to have the training awareness to make that thing work. So David Nugent, how you doing? Natalie Lewis, good afternoon to you. But Nidra, you're right. The retaliation is such a huge ordeal, man. And it's just, that culture's got to stop, and people have to hold that leadership accountable. So the last thing that, of course, you get asked is, well, RGB, what actions should a victim take? So someone, a male, a woman, has been a victim of sexual harassment, whether it's in a small business, whether it's as a vendor, which that happens more than what you think too. Vendor relationships between businesses where, a female vendor walks into a business and is sitting down with the male owner, or a male vendor comes in sitting down with a female owner, and there's either crude things or unwelcome, offensive things are done. Inappropriate touching, rubbing against somebody, and even making, comments of, again, go back to the definition, that exchange of value or benefit that involves a sexual favor and things like that. All these things, really start, coming into play. And so you've got to be able to report it up in some kind of fashion that you feel comfortable with, whether it's with another manager, whether certainly you should be able to do so with your human resources team at work, but you got to document it. Don't just call the HR manager and or just go to their office, right, without documenting. You got to document, so this is where you got to get your CSI hat on or your Law and Order SVU hat on, right? Y'all know, and take SVU for example. Y'all know back when Stabler and Benson were on there, they get to the crime scene, right? They see what happens. They try to figure out, hey, why'd y'all call SVU? Oh, and then the person shows them, something on the dead person's body that relates to some kind of sexual crime. This is why I called y'all. Okay. So now they know they got a case. So now what they got to start doing is start tracing back the steps. Okay. They got to trace the timeline back. Who was there? When? What was the person doing? What are some particular motives? But they got to document this whole thing. You can't just have it up in your mind, so you go to HR, you expose the dialogue, but you got to come with some fact and data, not just your raw emotion. And that's the thing that gets people is, again, that's why you define things, because human beings naturally, we love that raw emotion, right? But when we feel, excited and happy about something, when we feel down and out, when we get to those extremes in our personalities, we love to lead with and try to influence and manipulate with our emotion without the facts. So if you're going to do that, you need to have the facts ready. So have your facts in order. When did it happen? Who was it? Why do you think it happened? What was going on that led up to it? Is it the first time? Is this the 20th time? Have you seen it happen with this person, with anybody else? Has anybody else said anything? And so that's hard because a lot of times people don't want to feel like they're going to get someone in trouble and yada, yada, yada. But when you get to sexual harassment, or like Brandy said, sexual assault, when it gets to that level, that's a serious thing, folks. You've got to address that, because that's BS, and it's got to be addressed because it's a part of a culture that will kill the business, will kill employee morale, reputation, all those kind of things. So you've got to find a way to report it such that it can be addressed and you can trust that it's confidential. Nidra Reddit says, where can people seek help who are perps? This is a mental illness. Is it covered by health plan? Nidra, I don't really know. It's hard to say because, everybody's health, the health plan and healthcare and all that's been so shaky the last, let's just call it 10 years really, but certainly within these last few years, these last 3 or 4 years. So it is difficult. I would agree with you. Again, that goes back to the culture that part of your education training is not just for the victim piece of it, but for the perpetrator piece of it too. How do you handle that, right? How do you ensure that a person gets their due process? Can anybody just run into the office and just say, Nidra Reddit did this or did that or said this to me or touched me in this way and yada, yada, yada? Can anybody just do that and then the company just takes that word for it and just runs off with it? No. Yeah, you'd hope not. You'd hope there's no kangaroo court going on, right? But so what's the process for that? And how do you provide help for that? If you're a small business owner, you got a talented person that does well, that had this issue, right? If you choose that you want to help this person, what avenues do you take? And I'm sure there are avenues all around in terms of people who deal with psychology and deal with the human mindset and the human status that can help people find what is it deep rooted that allows them to feel that they can harass and even potentially assault other people. So, that's a part of, even the confidentiality that even if someone's had that issue, they have a avenue in which to get confidential assistance or intervention when it comes to something like that, because that's just as serious as dealing with the victim, at least in my opinion. Zane, how you doing, brother? Good afternoon to you. Reese Walker, Chris Eagleston, what's going on? Fly like an eagle, Chris Eagleston, out there doing his thing in California. A good friend of this podcast. Nidra Reddit says management should stop covering it up and accept it as, oh, that's just how he or she is. Agreed. That's why we talked about Nidra, the culture. Brandy said that's the thing. The perp does not see anything wrong with it. Yeah. And they're not going to see anything wrong with it until it's addressed directly, just like with any subject, right? People don't, there's the school of thought that people should know. And yeah, they should. If they're an adult, they should know that harassment and assault and all these kind of things are wrong, right? But until you make the hard stand, right, people will just keep going on. So behavior changes when there's got to be a hard stop, right? If you're driving on your car, what stops it? Well, the brakes. You know what I mean? So it's the brakes that stop it. That's what it is. It's not all this other stuff. It's the brakes. You know what I mean? It's what it is. All right. Okay, so Wendy Smalls, I got my cousin, Barry Jackson. What's going on? Wendy Smalls wants to join in. So I want to join in my cousin, Wendy. So we're going to do that here just now. Let's see. All right, cuz I've invited you on, so you can accept the invitation as you want. And I'd love to have, this is my good cousin, Whitney Smalls out in the South Carolina area. I appreciate her joining on. And if she wants to join on this, you have been invited, Wendy. So go ahead and join as you want. Again, Barry Jackson, what's going on, brother? Good brother there with the Memphis Youth Coalition. That's really got something, has been working in the community for some time and continue to do some things as we go into 2018. And I have the pleasure of being on the board with the Memphis Youth Coalition. And, really pleased at the work they've been doing for 10 plus years with youth in this area. So as it relates to music and art and dance and things like that. But for those of y'all that are listening on the podcast, you're not watching on Facebook Live, I've invited some people who may want to join on the podcast. Chris Eagleston, I thought I saw where you might have wanted to join as well. So feel free to add yourself in as you desire. So, Wendy, I'm just waiting on you, girl. What's up, cuz? You want to jump in or what's the deal? Go ahead and do so. I'm going to extend another invitation to you. Oh, looks like it's still out there. So check your phone or your device, Wendy. Get to where your device works if you have network problems or whatnot. But Ro, looks like you jumped back in. Rashonda Coleman, good afternoon to you. But this culture, y'all, and again, I don't know if y'all have experienced this or not, or kind of what the deal is. But it's got to stop, man. It's got to stop. It's on both sides, the perpetrator side and then the victim side. There's got to be a creation of comfort to be able to do that, to be able to reduce the fear of reporting, because that's just, I can't tell you how critical that piece is. You know what I mean? To have a situation where things occur and people are then discouraged from being able to report it up the chain. It's just crazy. Wendy, it shows that you were invited. So look within this post, and check. There may be a menu button down there that you may see a notification or something like that. But you've been invited to join. So all you got to do is click that to join. For my cousin Wendy Smalls. Good family there. She's doing some great things. There she goes. and I'm going to add her in. And again, for those listening on the podcast, I'm looking to invite in um, my cousin, my family, Mrs. Wendy Smalls, who is in South Carolina, and hadn't seen her in a couple of years. I always get a good chance to see her. It's always good times. Um, but while we're waiting for Wendy to come on, anybody else that wants to join, you could comment hashtag I want to join, and we can definitely have that. So, all right. So it looks like we've got Mrs. Wendy Smalls. Cuzzo, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. I'm doing real good. Glad we could get everything working. Yeah. So,
Good to see you.
yeah. How was everything yesterday? Everything go good with family?
Pretty good, pretty good. How about your end?
Yeah, you went real good. We're real good. So, cousin, I want you to jump in on this topic. I know you've had a chance to kind of listen in, and you've got some good insight. And I don't want you to run into nothing while you're there driving. But what's your thought on this whole thing in terms of sexual harassment and kind of the workplace or in business? What's kind of your overall thoughts on it?
Well, I'm just jumping in, so I hadn't heard much, but I do know that it is rampant. I don't know really too many people that have not been affected directly by this, which is sad, myself included. So, and I really don't know how to fix the problem. I think what's going on now, the hashtag Me Too, is a good start in people stepping forward, not being afraid to tell what has happened to them so that other people have the strength to step up is a great start. I just don't know where we go from there with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't even mentioned that as far as the hashtag would be too. I think that gave a nice awareness by being able to leverage, because social media, which obviously is a big way to bring awareness to something. And so that's a good point that you make in terms of, women and men, for that instance, being able to use that hashtag and give an awareness of how large the issue is, right? Because some people may think that this is only just because they see the people in the news, that this is only like an old white man problem, that these perps are only just these 70 and 80-year-old white men, or maybe an older man, more seasoned like a Bill Cosby. But this goes, it stretches much longer, and there are more people who've been a victim of this than most people would know. And some people are really close to people who've been a victim of this who may never know. They may do things like people did yesterday. They have Thanksgiving dinner, right? And they have no idea what a family member has been through, in the business or at work or things like that. And not only are people not willing to share it in terms of solving it at work, but a lot of times they're not even willing to tell family and friends because of that fear of being ostracized or, you just this, you need your job, so don't be up there doing this or saying this about that person and yada, yada, yada. It just creates, again, this whole culture. So that's a great point that you made in terms of that. So, from your standpoint, Wendy, and I know we're all kind of young here, so we're not going to know all the answer to this, but, where do you think that culture stems from? In terms of sexual harassment, where do you think that, that belief that it's okay for me to harass somebody, where do you think that comes from?
Media.
Mm.
Media. If you look back at movies, it's just the norm.
Mm-hmm.
I turned on the TV this morning. It was an old movie on. I had no idea what the name of it was, but it was just an old movie on, and the lady was serving the man a drink, and he decided to slap her on the behind.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. Kids repeat what they see, so it continues to go on. It's a generational thing.
Mm.
Nobody's getting called out. And I was thinking about, to your point, about people not telling family, they're at the dinner table not saying anything. But statistically, assaults happen from family members, which is the biggest reason why people don't say anything at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. Because that very person is at the dinner table.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Which is horrible.
It's definitely horrible. And that same culture that you make a point because it extends beyond just the workplace. So I know the topic today has kind of been talking about in business and the workplace, but that's such a big point that even takes it to even that much bigger of a scale, Wendy, is that that culture has even permeated within the family structure where you've had family members who have sexually harassed or sexually assaulted other family members, right? Which, again, the awareness of this, just has to get so big, and it's got to start in the culture. So the same things that I said earlier with the company would apply to the family. The family has to be accountable, right? And there has to be some level of leadership that says this will not go on in this family, right? And I'm going to make an example out of the first one as it comes. And then there's got to be a way for a family member to fear or not have the fear, but feel comfortable, confident in a confidentiality standpoint, Wendy, that they can share this, right, without a family member retaliating on them. So it's the same issue that they have at work that then now they have at home where they fear retaliation, they fear being ostracized from the family. And so families have to create some kind of structure. That's why you have to have family leadership, right? And, I'm always a proponent that family leadership starts with, at the very top. It starts with your men leaders that stand up and say, this is how our family is going to be, right? This is the kind of progression that we're going to have in our family legacy and our family name. And anybody within the family that violates that, we're going to deal with. And and a lot of families don't have that, and there's a slew of reasons why they don't. You and I probably could name a few, but there's a slew of reasons why they don't, and because of that, you get that. And so it's a great point you made.
Yeah, and that carries over into the workplace. If you're comfortable with doing that at home, you're definitely not going to do it in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So.
And assault has it's a tricky thing because a lot of times you can't prove what has happened.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people just choose not to go through the hassle, knowing that they don't have any hard proof to, bring this person to justice.
Right. Exactly. And that's why, it's a great point that you make, Wendy. And that's why I said earlier that as much as you can, you got to document, right? And I gave the analogy of like how Law and Order does. Like if you watch SVU, they're documenting along the way. Okay, I go to this person's house. I interview this person at this apartment. This is what they said they knew or they don't know. So they're tracking the whole timeline back so that, they can find an inconsistency or they can find a motive that allows them to explore that a different avenue. But a lot of times my fear is that victims don't document what happened. They just kind of go in on their emotion sometimes and they don't stop to think. And that's where the training education comes, because then you can say, if there is an unwelcome or inappropriate interaction with somebody, you've got to be able to document who it was, when, what you think the motive was, the time, place, all those kind of things. If you've got that documented, even if you have to go outside the company, right, to begin working towards justice. Because let's just say it was the CEO. Well, okay, now if you may not be comfortable going to HR because HR then might report to the CEO, right? So now you feel stuck, right? So even if you got to go outside of your company, right, you've got to get, an employment lawyer involved, right? First thing they're going to want to know is what you've documented. So I would encourage people to document as much as possible, as detailed as possible, down to, just like in a criminal sense, what they had on, what was the purpose of the meeting or the interaction, or was it just impromptu? Have you heard of this, or is this the first time, or has this person violated you or made you feel uncomfortable in the past? All those things need to be documented. Yeah.
I agree.
Yep. So I appreciate you jumping on, Cuzzo, and we got to talk soon because I know you got some good things going on there in South Carolina. So definitely love y'all and the family. Hope everything's going well. And I'm always just a call away.
All right. Love you too.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right. All right, y'all. So that was my cousin, Wendy Smalls. I thank her for jumping on. And Daniel Watson wants to jump on. So I want to get my brother on. Um, let's see if we can get you on, brother Daniel, so you can speak on some of this, um, brother. So I've issued the invite, and feel free if you want to jump on. We certainly can. In the meantime, while we're waiting for my brother Daniel Watson, my brother Sam Upshaw made a comment. I'd love for some HR folks to chime in and share some guidelines that apply also to decipher between someone being complimentary and harassing, abusive. And what's up, Justin Spencer? I see you've joined back. Sam, that I would love to have that too. I reached out to a few HR representatives, but I guess there's stuff with Turkey or whatnot. Some of them didn't want to jump on. They didn't want to be on the video. I guess they might have gained a little weight yesterday. But I would like to revisit this subject at some point and have some people jump on, because it's critical for me, I think, to get that kind of expertise in terms of an HR person who's maybe had to deal with this, or how they manage through this when I talk about the culture and education within their organization or their company or their business. And I would like to also hear, to your point, Sam, the difference between, I guess where that line kind of, tethers at between being complimentary of somebody and then being harassing or abusive. So, I know kind of where Sam's going with this. So if you take a scenario where a man goes up to a woman and says, you look really nice today, and then I'm just being really basic, but, is that harassing in itself? I would argue that no. Now, if you're constantly making comments to a woman about her appearance, and she has expressed or kind of stated, or you got the impression that that's not what she wants, then you need to leave it alone. So a lot of this comes down to just flat out no being no. You know what I mean? Like, you got to move on, brother. And sometimes with men, because, again, I'm not looking to get into all the psychological with men and women, but sometimes they just don't know when to stop and when to kind of take your L and move on, so to speak. So, I would love to hear that. If someone is an HR professional and would like to jump on, certainly feel free. Mike Cowan, what's going on, my man? But let's see. Miss Nene, how you doing? Donald Watson, what's going on, my man? Joining back on. So, Sam, I agree with you, man. And if I could get someone, or if y'all know some HR folks, tell them to get with me. We'll do this subject again, and we'll bring it on with some HR folks, and we'll have a further discussion around the next step of not just the culture of sexual harassment, but then again, how are people out there in the field today? What's being done today, and then going forward to eradicate it, so that we could have kind of a truer equality in the workplace where there's no threats of this, and like my cousin Wendy said, there's no fear of the retaliation or people not feeling that they can come up. And Wendy said something powerful that strikes a lot of people, particularly this time of the year when you talk about from the family standpoint. And I'm going to do a subject on that, at some point in the future, where you talk about sexual harassment and assault even within the family. That's probably going to be a little bit tougher subject for a lot of people to hear, but there's some statistics on that, and then there's some things that can be done even in that regard. But it really correlates with this, that you got to have the leadership, and you got to have leadership then has to drive the culture. So Daniel Watson, I'm not sure. I gave you the invite, brother. I'd love to have you on, but I'm kind of running up on time on today. But thank you so much for joining on the I Really Mean It podcast. I'm your host, RGB. You can subscribe and listen to this. Of course, it's on my Facebook page, Ron G. Brooks. So you can follow me. I've got a few more slots for friends, I guess, till I get to my 5,000. But you can certainly follow me. You could go to ireallymeanitpodcast.com, ireallymeanitpodcast.com. Can subscribe and listen on iTunes, iHeartRadio, what else? SoundCloud, YouTube, all that kind of thing. So it looks like my brother Daniel is going to jump on. So I'm going to try to add you in, brother, real quick before I end this thing on today. So if you're listening on the podcast, it looks like good brother Daniel Watson, business owner here in the city, and someone that I've known and been able to admire his business etiquette and his business process for him and his family for a long time. And so definitely someone that's respected in his community across multiple communities, not just one particular demographic. Him and his family have been in business for a number of years, and he's a good brother. If you ever run into him, man, definitely shake his hand and look at his business and how they handle themselves and conduct themselves. But I'll give you a quick second, Daniel, man, if you want to jump in. If not, man, no worries. I can catch you on the rebound. So I'll give you a quick second for that. Mia Atkinson, how you doing? Good afternoon. Again, hope everybody had a great day yesterday. I hope that the rest of your 2017 is of value and profitable. I hope you're ready for what's going to turn out to be a fairly noisy 2018, that you're able to keep your focus. For everybody that's got great expectations going into 2018, I hope all those and more are fulfilled. If you had a rough 2017, what are you going to do to turn it around? There were some losses, some L's we took with some folks that we'll talk about towards the end of the year as it relates to 2017 with people who transition life, things like that. You could go back and check out the podcast a couple weeks ago for the brother Burnell E. Smith II. Did a special tribute on that people seem to really like. I got some good feedback on that. Kiana Cox, Miss Cox, how you doing? Definitely you're someone that has experienced a loss recently, and certainly you and your family have been in the thoughts with that as you've had to experience the transition of life within your family. So Daniel, man, I was trying to get you on. I had the invite for you, and I was able to hit add. So I'd love to get you on real quick, my brother Daniel Watson. Miss Cox, you're certainly welcome. It's kind of funny, even though you don't see people every day and that kind of thing, it's still, Facebook kind of draws people together and, kind of allows you to be kind of a community family, for lack of a better term. But Kiana, I need to get over and check your business out, girl. I know you're doing some things over there with your new location. And we had talked about it early on, so I'm very proud that you're able to keep that moving and really build your business. I believe you're out there in Germantown, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't had a chance to get Kim out there for some of that couple stuff you got going on, but I see that every time I see a picture, I kick myself, and it looks like so much fun. So would love to have you on the show at some point too, Kiana. But hope things are going. I know yesterday had to be difficult within your family, and many of you had that with loved ones who transitioned life this year. Or, you've gotten bad news and things like that. Just remain encouraged. You're still here for a reason, which is to keep grinding and be that beacon of light for yourself, your family, and then for this community. So, Daniel Watson, I'm not sure what's going on, man. I'm trying to get you on. It must be your phone and not mine. So, Carmen, what's going on, Peanut? Other cousin, Carmen Williams, out in South Carolina. Fantastic family, her and her husband, Ray, doing great things out there. And three little cousins out there, three little girls that match my little girls. And so, definitely glad that you could join on. Daniel, I'm not sure, man, what's really going on with that. We'll try to get you on next time, brother. Kiana, I see that Yeah, so it's actually Bartlett near Wolf Chase. Okay, I don't know why I thought Germantown, Kiana, but yeah, she corrected me. Her business is out there in Bartlett near Wolf Chase. If you have a business, y'all go ahead and comment it down here too. Put your website and stuff like that. Any of y'all that are in business, y'all know I'm a businessman, so y'all don't be shy about that at all. I know there's shameless plugs and things like that, but people should know about your business. Same way they running out here on Black Friday at everybody else's business, right? So, yeah, I got the Android too, Daniel. That shouldn't stop it too much. I'm gonna try it one more time with my brother Daniel Watson and see if we could get it on. Yep, Kiana Cox. There you go. CanvasTherapy.com. Y'all go check that out. She's out in the Bartlett Wolf Chase area. Check out anybody that wants to post their business on here. Feel free to do that. No matter what size or scale your business is in. So, Daniel, I'm just going to catch you on the next time, brother. Listen, RGB, the I Really Mean It Show podcast. I'm just so excited about those that are continuing to support the show. Go out, subscribe, listen, share this video here if you're on Facebook. And
your host, RGB.
Let's just keep this thing going. If you've got a topic recommendation you want to jump on, if you want to come sit with me and co-host the show, I can come to you. I'm completely mobile. And we're just going to keep doing this thing. Make sure you check out some of these other podcasts that I support and I listen to. The Startup Life with Dominic Lawson, Home of the Hustle with my guy Jason Daniels. Check out Lawrence Thompson. He's on Facebook Live, does a great thing. He's in my friends list. So check these people out. And let's just keep this thing going. We're going to be supportive and we're going to make it, baby. So let's have a great weekend. Went a little long on the show today, so forgive me. RGB, I Really Mean It Show podcast.